You can, of course, join us online at coc.lacounty.gov. We sent a number of emails out and we tweeted it, of course, so we hopefully will have some folks who will join us. We still have space available at our upcoming meeting, by the way, for family impact remarks. So if you'd like to give a remark concerning the impact that the Sheriff's Department has had on you and your life or your loved one, feel free to email us or let us know one way or another. We'll put you on the agenda. Quick update, we did go through a number of interviews for new commissioners for the commission. We're nearing the end of that process and hope to have our new commissioners seated sometime in the next month or so. So we'll send a communication out to the board offices early next week with sort of the results of this entire process that we have gone through. At our meeting on Thursday, we will, as usual, start with subcommittee or ad hoc committee updates. One of those updates is going to be a rather lengthy update, and that's our update on our study that we're doing and research we're doing on the issue of deputy gangs. As I'm sure you all know, we have put together a pretty nice cadre of outside counsel, pro bono counsel, to assist us in this effort. A number of various large law firms in LA who are offering their service pro bono to do this study for us. You know, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because we wanted to have an independent view of this whole issue of deputy gangs in the Sheriff's Department. The perception, of course, is that the other studies that have been done have been tainted one way or another because they've been funded by the county or some other issue. So this is really an effort for the people's perspective to have an independent view of what's going on in the Sheriff's Department and hopefully get to the bottom of this issue of the deputy gangs. This process is going to take about 5 to 6 months. We've already started the process, and I want to thank those outside firms, and I also want to thank County Council for their assistance in helping us put together this group of outside firms. And we're working closely with County Council and other groups to make sure we get through this issue. After that, we're going to have and spend the bulk of our meeting on the issue of conditions within the jails. We've been concerned with notices that we've been receiving on the number of deaths that have been occurring within our jail system. Between 2016 and 2021, by the way, based upon a report from the OIG, the number of deaths in the jails has more than doubled. And so we want to take a look as to why that's happening. We know that just about half of those deaths are based upon drug overdoses and suicides. How are folks dying of drug overdoses in the jail system? Are there issues that we need to look at in terms of the suicides that are occurring within the jail system? So we want to take a very close look at that. We're also looking at the issue of overcrowding in the jail, the physical and mental health of folks in the jail, and the smuggling of drugs that are coming into the jail system. We're going to ask the Sheriff's Department to hopefully place some additional information on their website about deaths in the jail, to provide us an annual report on deaths in the jail. And as well, we want to connect, if we can, the family assistance program to those families who are impacted by folks who have died while in custody of the Sheriff's Department. Finally, we'll have a brief discussion under the Executive Director's report about the LASD budget. We have taken some public testimony over the past month and a half on the LASD budget, and we intend to send that information on to the board. And that's about it for our meeting, so I'll be happy to take any questions if you all have any.
Thanks so much, Brian. That's an ambitious agenda. Appreciate you.
It is. Sort of like the public safety agenda.
Totally. And you make me feel underdressed, so I'm going to go change like half hour. Christina, and then I can't remember if Veronica or Esther was next, but Christina, you can kick us off.
Sure. I think Esther followed me, and then it was Veronica, but I'll let them fight to the death over it. So thanks, Brian. Just a couple of questions that I'm hoping the COC can either put on some of the documents or maybe just briefly discuss during the meeting, because some of my curiosity comes from who some of the council are that are assisting with the deputy gangs investigation. I know that I think informally we may have been told that, but just for my kind of curiosity, I would just like to know sort of, who the players are. I've heard good things about them, so just I'd like to that could be made public. And then the other thing, just from former academia kind of work that you used to do, when these some of the new studies and investigations that the COC is doing, like, does in the process of sort of I guess identifying the research parameters, are there things like, here's the question we're going to try and answer, here are the key assumptions that we're going for, here's the methodology that we're using for? Because often sometimes when some of these studies are done at a scholastic level, there's details about both the quantitative and quantitative and qualitative methods that the researchers kind of do to identify those things, right? And so is that something that, I mean, I'm sure it is something that the COC is doing, but, you know, I guess where in the process of the research is that, like, what phase is that developed? Is that made public to the board? I guess I'm just curious to sort of, it gives me a preparation to know what I can anticipate in terms of the study showing me. So can you talk a little bit about that process? And I think those are my only two questions. Hopefully that made sense.
Sure. It does. So in terms of your first question, we will provide a list of those firms that are engaged in this process at our meeting on Thursday. I don't know if you all know Bert Dykesler, but he is going to be leading this effort for us. And I know that Mr. Julian also is part of this effort as well. So it's a pretty august group of people, but we'll list those names individually at our meeting on Thursday. In terms of our methodology and our process for going forward, some of the work has already been done, and that work has been done through Professor Kennedy and his students at Loyola Law School. So that's really sort of forming the basis, or at least one of the bases for the work that's being done. It'll be both qualitative and quantitative. Real world folks that we're going to be able to talk to, witnesses that we're going to be able to call and interview and talk about their very specific and personal and anecdotal stories as to what happened in their lives. And we'll also do some investigation and some studies on sort of the psychology of what's happening within the Sheriff's Department and why there are these gangs, evidence that they do exist. And then we're going to offer some suggestions, a number of recommendations, and some of those recommendations are already in draft as to which direction we think the county and the Sheriff's Department should go to eradicate this issue and make sure it doesn't happen again in the future.
Thanks. I meant, and I am looking, not, my question wasn't necessarily super focused on the deputy gang part of it. So sorry, that my bad, I should have clarified it. But more like, 'cause I know that the upcoming study is focusing on the increased deaths in the jails. And so like that, you know, like, so that definitely, you know, really interests me, you know, that's something that might, you know, our office put forward a motion that passed yesterday that, you know, because of the concern, and we've received a lot of emails about it. So that's sort of also the part that I'm looking at, you know, because since that's sort of a new thing that's coming, there isn't necessarily, there have been a couple of like federal studies that have been done that have sort of looked at that in terms of like the suicide rate and the increase, like, so that's really sort of where, since that is at its infancy and it's being conceptualized and potentially moving forward, you know, my question is like, you know, what are those, I guess, key assumptions going to be, and sort of how is the COC going to identify what quantitative and qualitative information it's going to identify in order to start its research process. So so that's obviously something that you don't necessarily need to address now because that's in the future, but that's just, you know, my investment in really wanting to understand sort of what information is being, you know, looked at moving forward for that particular project, and just gives me a sense too, you know, how the COC is approaching its, you know, information gathering in that process. So that's about, I hope that better clarifies.
It does. And let me just add this, that we are really at the nascent stages of this whole review of the issue of the deaths in the county jail. We're going to be relying and working closely with the OIG. Our office spoke with the Civil Brand Commission also yesterday, so we're going to be working with them, and hopefully we can put together this sort of triad of organizations to really take a look at what's going on in the jail system and shed some light on that.
Yeah, because I know that I think one of the studies that was cited in the motion yesterday was a report that was put out. I don't think it was by DOJ, like federal DOJ, but that really highlight very much the same thing. So that might not be another bad partner, since they very clearly have good statistical data that could probably contribute to this as well. And they're a completely outside source too, which might provide a different perspective as well. So anyways, my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Esther.
Yeah. Hey, Brian. Thanks so much for the update. So just a couple, of things that I wanted just to bring up. My boss had put forward the friendly amendment that SD 5 and 4 accepted, right, to include the COC, the OIG, and also even the substance abuse SAPC. Because I think, right, when we talk about the overdoses inside the jails, and thanks SD 5 and 4 for doing the motion, right, we need to look at this like holistically. And so glad that, this is going to be a real kind of partnership to identify kind of the causes and how we address overdoses, inside the jails, including, how they could be possibly, brought in. So, really looking forward to, the report back on that piece. The other is the deputy gang. Right, because I think when you had brought this up, it definitely sounded like what we did back in 2012, the CCJV, right? So jail violence, it's on deputy gangs. Is the COC doing like special meetings so that the public can hear from some of these witnesses, or are these kind of private? Because I bring this up because the CCJV had public hearings. Where they did, talk to, the panel or whatever, spoke to, the witnesses and so forth. So I was curious if this was going to be done publicly, if the COC was going to have special kind of like deputy gang hearings, or if it was just going to be part of the COC meetings.
We intend to do both. The plan, and in fact, the plan at this meeting was, but we weren't able to sort of put this together at this point, was to spend a considerable amount of time with the potential of having some public testimony. But our intent is to have some special meetings specifically on this issue of deputy gangs, and there will be some public testimony from potential witnesses as well, and there will be some private testimony as well for those folks who don't want to speak publicly. So I guess the answer is really all the above.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm looking forward to, and, I want to thank the COC and the OIG, especially, Chair Sean Kennedy, looking at this deputy gang issue. I know my bosses, has put forward, various motions around deputy gang supported by this board as well. Let me see if I have, is there a timeline, Brian, on when the COC would be issuing kind of their report on deputy gangs, or whatever this is going to be?
Yeah, we
their
know,
recommendations.
just to let you know, you'll be receiving a request for an extension on the motion that the supervisor put together that we're part of. But the idea is that our overall effort will take about 5 to 6 months. Of course, that could change based upon things that we might discover, but our hope is that it will be a 5 to 6 month period.
Great, super. Looking forward to that extension request.
Gotcha.
All I have, thanks.
Thanks, Esther. Veronica? Okay. I had a quick question. So, Brian, I know you mentioned Professor Kennedy. I know for a fact he's done a lot of, he's contributed a lot of free labor. I had a question about your most urgent staffing needs. Like, I know there's various requests, but what do you think is the most urgent? Just so that, the commissioners who also have like full-time jobs are not working another full-time job.
We put in a request for a deputy executive director in the budget. I think it's a pretty important position that we'll have. But I also think, we're in the midst of COVID, and we've stopped our in-person meetings. And prior to COVID, we were really doing quite a bit of public outreach. One of the main missions of our commission is to serve as this bridge between the community and the sheriff's department. And so I think we really have to emphasize, we'll come out of COVID one day, and it looks like we're doing that now, that really have to emphasize this need to have folks who are able to go into the community. Information officers are able to go into the community and to meet with community groups. We get requests all the time, at least I do, from folks in the community who want us to give a presentation, who want to tell their story, and they don't want to come to a full meeting. And there are requests that come into our office like that all the time. So the ability to have folks who are able to do that. And then thirdly is folks who are able to do really high-level quantitative analysis of data and trends that are occurring within the Sheriff's Department. That's important as well. So, if you give us 3 or 5 positions, we'll be pretty happy about that.